Good afternoon. Nice to see all of you. Thank you for staying so late. I hope that all of you live in Vilnius. You don't have to travel too far to get home tonight. And if you fall asleep, we will shorten and we will hurry up on this one. So we have a little bit more than 1 hour, 1.5 hours here today. And it's going to be me and Aurimas. So it's going to host this session together. And we have structured this 1.5 hours around that topic, around that question. But we will not answer it directly, like saying, this is the leadership. So we're going to do more of an explorative session together. But we're going to take an offset from the institution, from the school that I represent and where Aurimas joined 4 years ago now. And we use this as a case, more or less, to inform the conversation for us together. Is that okay? Okay. And since we're so few, if there is anything that is unclear, you just shout or raise your arm or whatever you want to do. So in a way, so we stay on the same page, all of us. So, my name is Krister, and that's a Swedish name, for those that don't know that. But I live in Denmark, and I've done so since 1995, more or less. And have any one of you been to Denmark before? Oh, there's a few. Yes, you should not answer, though. I know that you have been there. So, and we are situated in the second largest city, and which is called Aarhus. Have anyone been there? No, not you. Has anyone else been there? No. Smaller than Vilnius, but larger than some of the other cities in this country. This is where we used to be. This is the old part called the Latin Quarters. And we stayed there for more than 22 years, and it created a very special vibe around the whole education. This summer we moved to here, which is a very different environment. It's down at the harbor. It's what's called the movie city, and it's the center of the creative industries in the city and also in the region. What is the KaosPilot? The KaosPilot is a hybrid between a business and a design school. That means that to some extent when people say, is this a business school? Yes, it's true, but it's not the whole truth. When people say it's a design school, that's also true, but it's not the whole truth. We are a bit in between, or a mix of the both, if you want. So we draw upon certain traditions within these schools. So from a business school's perspective, we draw from the traditions of organizational development and from project management. And from the design school, we draw upon the traditions of service design, of branding, about experience design. And we meld that all together to foster leadership and entrepreneurship. So our aim with the students and with the programs that we offer is that the people will come out as better leaders and better entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of stories one can say about the KaosPilots. But where the tradition we used to come from, all of us, not only in Denmark, but maybe more that people in a way had the idea of you go through the education and you will end up in that position. That is what you will do. That one does not exist anymore, and it hasn't existed for many, many years. To some extent in our countries, we often talk about people need to finding themselves. At the KaosPilot, we are more in line with Shaw, where we say it's more about creating yourself, that you spend a whole lot of time at our school to create the person you want to be and the future that you want to be part of. And that is what we try to design for. Very often people ask, who are the students that join to the KaosPilots? Well, they come from a very, very different background, all of them in a way, because we emphasize to have people from different backgrounds joining, people with different sets of values and different sets of ambitions, which means that we accept students that are a bit over 20, minimum 21. We have exceptions, but you need to be 21, we normally say. And you need to have finished high school, but we have exceptions for that too. it's not so important where you're coming from. It's more important where you want to go. And as such, we bring in people with a variety of backgrounds. It also facilitates the individual's learning, because all of them are not just students. They are also co-trainers. They are teachers for each other. So they are supposed to use what they have when they join our school. People come from maybe an academic background. Some people come from the army. Some people come from project management positions. Some people come from a whole lot of employment. Some people come from traveling. So we bring all of that together into a mix. And 4 years ago, we had our first student from Lithuania joining. And that was Aurimas. Aurimas, share how you joined the school.
Hello, everyone. Well, I was the one... why am I speaking in English? I'm switching to Lithuanian. Gerai, tai prieš 4 metus aš buvau tas besiblaškantis jaunuolis, kuris ieškojo, ką veikti, ką daryti, niekas netinka, nepatinka Lietuvos studijos kokybės netokios, kažko netaip ieškau. Ir aš vis ieškodavau, vis mesdavau, vis bandydavau. Ir man draugas papasakojo apie KaosPilot mokyklą, į kurią atvažiavus mano buvo pirmas įspūdis. Aš atsargiai, aš labai bijau verslo, nes galvoju, velniop verslas, velniop tie visi pinigai, produkcija, dar kažkas. Ir aš atėjau į mokyklą, kuri iš dalies buvo projektai ir verslo mokykla, bet tas jausmas aplink mokyklą, kaip jie bendravo, kaip jie keitėsi idėjom, ką jie veikė, ką jie darė. Aš atėjau į egzamino prezentaciją ir mane pirmo kurso, pirmo semestro egzamino prezentacija mane, taip sakant, nunešė visiškai labiau negu visa kita, ką aš esu matęs. Aš esu matęs magistrų gynimasis, bakalaurų, kokybė, idėjos, tikras darimas, dėstytojų ir studentų bendradarbiavimas, keitimasis nuomonėmis, tikras klientas. Ir dar atsimenu po to viso egzamino ir mane įtraukė į tą egzaminą. Ir po to koridoriui buvo toks didelis pakabintas plakatas, kuris mane užkabino. Jame buvo parašyta "Fuck business without culture". Ir aš galvoju, mokykla, kuri sugeba taip tiesiai, taip drąsiai pasakyti tokius žodžius, iš tiesų stovi už savo vertybės. Mokykla, kuri nebijo savo vardę panaudoti žodį chaosas. Irgi tai yra. Ir tai yra verslo mokykla. Aš jeigu kažkam reikia greit apibūdinti, tai sakau, verslo mokykla, verslo mokykla hipiams, kurie nori pakeisti pasaulį. Iš tiesų įgalina veikti, įgalina daryti, įgalina viską keisti. O mokykloje bandome surinkti kuo daugiau įvairių žmonių, kurie sugeba dirbti kartu, kurie nori dirbti kartu, kurie nori veikti, kurie nori mokytis, kurie drįsta rizikuoti, šokti, bandyti viską. Bandyti per klaidas, per mokymasi. Tai va, ir su tai žmonėm, aišku, kai jie dangia tokie skirtingi būna ir konfliktų ir visko, bet mokomės per projektus, per gyvenimą, per konfliktus, per sprendimą, per darimą. Tai va, su tokiais įvairiais žmonėmis mes ir gyvenam. Nuo muzikantų, futbolininkų iki vadybininkų, aktorių ir viso kito, visi kartu bandome sukurti kažkokią vertę, kas reikalinga pasauliui. We have a question next, yes? O man įdomu, kadangi, o kodėl jūs atėjote, kas jūs pritraukė į šią prezentaciją? Tiesiog pasikalbėkite grupeliai, kodėl jūs esate čia.
So, moving on, where do the KaosPilot come from? So in Denmark in the 1980s, there was a lot of youth unemployment. And there were less opportunities than exist today. So there was an organization established called the Frontrunners, which works to counter the sense of, maybe a sense of hopelessness and a sense of meaninglessness, and to support young people that wanted to do something with their life. And the Frontrunners were established in the late mid-80s, in the beginning of the 80s, and throughout the 80s they did a lot of projects, and they became very, very successful. And they were approached at the end of the 80s by a group called Next. And Next was an anti-nuclear organization that wanted to prevent the spread of nuclear arms in the world. And they had worked and did some events in the US to try to convince the Americans that nuclear arms is not a good thing. Then, as you know, the second largest nuclear power was the Soviet Union. So they decided, when Gorbachev had risen to power, that they wanted to show him what glasnost and perestroika was all about. So they wanted to do a project around nuclear arms in the Soviet Union. So next came to the frontrunners because there was a lot of people there and a lot of active people. So they say, do you want to join for a project which is going to be about nuclear arms and it's going to be about Soviet Union? And the frontrunner said, that sounds great. So, do we have any money? No, we don't have any money to make it happen. Do we have any legal permit to get into the country? No, no legal permit. And we as Scandinavians at least could not travel into the Soviet Union without permit. So let's say, so no money, no permit. Do you know what we will do when we get to the Soviet Union? No, no idea. And then the frontrunner said, that's great, we're all in on this one. So that project culminated in 1989 with approximately 2,000 young people from Denmark and some of the other Scandinavians that went into Leningrad and Moscow. And throughout a week, they did a lot of cultural and social projects. And that culminated with a rock concert in front of the Kremlin on the Red Square. And on the eve of that evening, the leader of the frontrunner, the first principal of the KaosPilot, was interviewed by Danish TV. When do you think we will see changes coming to Soviet Union? And the microphone in his face, and he said, for sure there will be changes. 20 years from now, everything will be different. 4 months later, the Berlin Wall came down. And that really, really created something amongst everyone involved, that if you can move 2,000 people by land from Denmark into the heart of Soviet Union, and you don't see those changes coming around the corner, you need to pay a bit of attention to how you're listening. What is it that you're hearing, really? Because if you can't hear that, what then do you actually hear? The second one was that even if this was a cultural and social success, it was a whole lot of challenge for the organizers. Economical distress and personal stress, and so they asked themselves, what type of education would we have needed in order to conduct such a project? And that was the birth of the KaosPilots. So the KaosPilot did not originate out of an academic institution. It more grew out of the street as a response to an immediate demand. And very often when we come from it and when we work with educational institutions, right, they have existed for not only decades, hundreds of years. And do you know what they say is significant when you talk about an institution? Do you know what the definition is of an institution? Never heard of that. They normally say that an institution is an organization that has forgotten why it exists. You move from an individual need to get some help from someone, and suddenly you're a group. And after a while, you become an organization. And then eventually you evolve into a state of being an institution where your purpose, why you exist, is gone. So the purpose is to maintain itself. And that's a lot of problems when it comes to schools and educations. So the KaosPilot as such was constructed, or can be understood as an idea of what motivates people to learn, to create, and to lead. Aurimas, I'm just putting you on the spot here. Tell us something that you learned at the education that stands out to you in terms of this. Yes.
Okay, so what have I... Switching back to Lithuanian. Taigi, ką aš išmokau? Ką aš išmokau, tai išmokau dirbti su kitais žmonėmis. Anksčiau aš nemėgau dirbti su kitais žmonėmis, nes tai būdavo konfliktai, tai būdavo nesutarimai, vengti viso to, eiti pačiam užsidaryti, padaryti tyliai darbą ir ilsėtis. Bet kadangi žmonės buvo labai skirtingi ir labai įdomus, kadangi mes pirmą stojame į mokyklą, visa aplikacija vyksta tai, kad mes aplikuojame, tenai jau rašai, kas tave motyvuoja, kodėl tu nori stoti, kuo tu nori būti, kuo mokykla tau gali padėti, ką tu darytumai neįstotum, tu jau įstoji motyvuotas. Tu matai, kokie motyvuoti yra kiti. Po truputį tu užsikreti ir pradedi klijuoti, tokie skirtingi, motyvuoti, įdomus. Išmokau dirbti su kitais, aišku, buvo konfliktų visko, bet tam yra tam tikros metodologijos, pratimai, išmokome kartu spręsti problemas, išmokome pastebėti, kad kartu, kai mes esame skirtingi, mes randame labai įdomių sprendimų. Būdami tokie patys mes nerastume po vieną, tikrai irgi tokių idėjų nesugalvotume. Išmokau daryti, išmokau labai daug daryti. Eiti, daryti, skambinti, bandyti, eiti į gatvę, iš tiesų veikti, mokytis per darymą. Darai kartu, su draugų pagalba, reflektuoji, žiūri, galvoji, dar darai. Išmokau sekti kitus žmonės lyderius, išmokau būti lyderiu, išmokau keistis tarp tų pozicijų, išmokau pastebėti, kaip veikia visas mažas organizacijos. Bet labiausiai tai išmokau tikėti, kad aš kaip žmogus ir mes kaip žmonės, kaip draugai, kad mes kartu galime padaryti pokytį. Jeigu mes keturiese, jeigu mūsų 35 rezidentai galime tiek nuveikti, ką gali nuveikti, nežinau, visa šalis arba 10 tokių mokyklų. Tai va, labai daug išmokau. Praktika, žmonės, verslas, išmokau gyventi, džiaugtis ir matyti galimybės.
So the education as such is very messy, right? Because that's also because that we want, if you want to promote entrepreneurship and leadership, in a way you also have to accept that the school is the reality. It's not the reality, but it's not the full reality. And what the students meet after the school is also something that they should practice in school. Which leads us to another question we would like you to have a conversation around, which is, what types of schools are needed? Do you understand the question? Maybe you can explain a bit more.
Klausimas yra, tai kokių mokyklų reikia šiandien, bet aš galvoju, kad būtų įdomiau, jūs pasikeiskite stalais ir pabandykite susės, kad nebūtų vienur 7, kitur 4, nes labai skirtingai kalbat. Tai jeigu galit, pajudėkit, susipažinkit su skirtingai žmonėm, nes vis tiek atvykot iš tų pačių ar miestų ar organizacijų. Rai, dėkui už tai, kad kalbat, kad dalinatės. Dabar norėčiau išgirsti, gal kažkas kažkokių idėjų turiu. Pasakykit, kokios mokyklos reikia šiandien. Trumpai, kokių žodžių. Kas norit pasidalinti? Bent porą žodžių. O, nu gerai.
Mes pasvajojom, kad mokyklos turėtų būti tokios, ne kurios ruošia gyvenimui, o kuriuose yra gyvenama jau dabar. Ir kad vaikas baigęs mokyklą turėtų pabaigęs jau 12 metų nuoseklios gyvenimo praktikos.
That the schools should be real life and not the imitation and getting ready to life. And that the kid who finishes school should have 12 years of experience of school. Of life, not school, of life, sorry. Yes.
Tai vienas dalykas svarbu, kad būtų santykių mokykla, kad galėtų žmonės mokintis, kaip būti, kurti santykius ir išlikti ir konfliktuose ir nežinau, iniciatyvose imtis grupėse. Tai apie tą tokį, kad ne tik tai apie dalyką, bet ir apie tai, kaip klasė gyvena, kaip mes kartu kūrėm dalykus. Ir dar vienas dalykas svarbu, kad galima būtų klysti arba mokintis iš klaidų, daryti klaidas, o ne vertinti tik tai teigiamus dalykus, o klysti dar kažkas.
Dėkui. One of the points is that it should be as a community learning to live together, communicate, go through the conflicts. And the other point is that failure, it should be allowed to fail and to learn from failures. No, you're not allowed to fail here. You have to produce good results. Kas dar turit kokių?
Tai mes daugiausia kalbėjom apie tai, kad mokykloje svarbiausia yra pamatyti gerus dalykus negu blogus, kas yra atvirkščiai dabar, ir kad vaikai būtų labiau skatinami negu baudžiami.
It should be that the positive would be empowered, like appreciative inquiry. So to focus on the positive instead of the negative. And that, the kids should be also empowered to do instead of restricted and pulled back. Gal dar kažkokią idėją, ko neišgirdom?
Man atrodo labai svarbu yra, kad mokymas vyktų iš to, kas vyksta aplinkui ir pradedama būtų ne nuo dalykinių žinių, bet būtent nuo realijų aplinkui, o paskui iš tų realijų einama jau į tos visus dalykus, kurie vyksta. Tai yra nuo problemų, kurios mūsų supa, problemų, fenomenų ir taip toliau. Ir tik tada prieinama nuo jų iki ten formulių, iki cheminių elementų, iki kažko. Bet tas poreikis mokytis visų tų dalykų kiltų iš to, kas vyksta aplinkui. Taip pat mokykloje mes įsivaizduojam, kad turėtų būti be patyčių. Ir ten kažką mes turim daryti, kad tas vieną dieną baigtųsi. Ar ne, taip turėtumėm dirbti, kad nebeliktų to fenomeno iš vis. Ir nežinau, kas dar.
Two more points. That we should learn from reality first of what is happening around us, and from that reality slowly bring it back to school, and then if the formulas are relevant, then to use them. But basically bring life to school and school to life. And the second thing, that there should be no bullying. No bullying. Yes, thank you. So I give it back to you.
Yes. Okay, that's some good points for actually where we're going with this one. One of the things that I find most important with the question is that you actually ask the question. Very often we just take it for granted. We download it and we just move along. Some of the points you talk about is that when you look at schools, at least from our perspective, is that you can in a way talk about them from either from a structural perspective or from a cultural perspective. That from a structural perspective you would talk about policies, you would talk about procedures, national tests, staff, students, time, all of those type of things. And we put an enormous emphasis on those parts. Every time something goes wrong, we need a better structure. We change the policy. All of those type of things. And we put far less importance on the other side, which is actually the cultural aspects of what does it mean to be in the school? What are the values of the school? What is important here? I was going to share with you a framework from our pedagogical platform, which lies more in the other end than in the structural perspective. And one of those pillars is this one. It's the experimental. That very often schools are oriented towards being able to deliver the right answers to the students. Because that's the only way you pass the test, that you can provide the right answer. And we should not underestimate that it's good to know the answers on tests, right? But we actually don't really test what the students learn. We test what they don't learn. That's the thing that comes out of this one. They learn far more than what you test them on. At the school, at the KaosPilot, we say that the experiment that happens at school is key. And we try to enforce experiments taking place. And what you can see it in a very concrete example is that since we work with projects, everything we do is executed through projects. That means effectively that we don't know what the result will be. Meaning that we don't know what the student will hand in to us that we have to assess them upon. So every exam is new. Every project is new. And that gives a certain type of challenge to the school, at least on a structural perspective. But on a cultural perspective, it makes a whole lot of sense. Another pillar is the enterprising aspect. So we are in a school that fosters leadership and entrepreneurship. And we want people to become entrepreneurs. But it's not necessarily so that everyone should be an entrepreneur. But everyone could be enterprising. They could create things. And we want to get back to that original source that you normally have as you're a child. You are familiar with George Land. Have you heard about him? He was a very famous NASA scientist in the 60s. And he was part of the assessment around which technicians should work at NASA when we send people out in space. So if something goes wrong, who can actually fix this? Who are going to be the engineers in that room when we need to fix something that goes on close to the moon? The same test that they developed to recruit engineers, he modeled it and said, let's look at kids and see what comes out in terms of creativity. And the results that he did, the first one was quite astonishing, because you almost had like 100% of the 2 years that he tested showed like creativity level genius For the 2 years, he tested on more than 150,000 kids. And he showed the genius level was almost 100% for the 2-year-olds. Clearly, and that goes a bit back to how do you measure creativity, but one way is to look at how ingenuitively can you meet a new problem. Do you try to if your first attempt to solve the problem doesn't succeed, do you test something new or do you do the same, just a bit harder? Like how we try to do it as teachers and stuff. No. Denmark is a country. I say it higher so you can remember it better the next time. What he did after that one is that he tested people when they were older. So the second time was around when they were 7, and then when they were 12, and then when they were 19, and when they were 24 and graduated from the university. The shocking result is how it's declining, the creativity level. So already when they are in the age of 12, they're down to something like 25-30%. When they leave university, the genius level of creativity is down to 2%. So basically what he concluded out of this one is that uncreativity or non-creativity is actually something we learn. We learn to become less creative in schools. So what we try to do at the KaosPilot, leading back to this one, is not that we believe that we make people more creative. We basically take away a lot of stuff that they have gotten throughout their educational system and go back to that original source where you actually really want to be enterprising, where you want to be creative and try new things. And this can be done also with adults, also with teachers, just so you know. The other side, so we are a tertiary education. For us, when students come to us, they come either as a consequence of they want to do something very, very different, or they want to do something to a large or deeper extent than they have in the past. Meaning that they also come to us not only as creative minds, but they also come with the intention of figuring out where do they want to go. Where is their future? And very often what we experience is that the world that many of these people meet looks a bit like this. It looks like a bunch of trees. For some it's difficult to see the forest. For some it's difficult to find the track of this one. For some it's very difficult to make choices. So what we try to do is that we try to create a school and a program which is explorative, that gives the opportunity for everyone to figure out which way am I supposed to go. The last of these 4 pillars is the experiential side. It is a difference to learn about leadership and do leadership. There is a difference from learning about entrepreneurship and really trying it out. And you can try this by, if you can come across a book where you read about how is it to go swimming. And if you read that one, very quickly you realize that the words only gives meaning because that you have taken a swim in the Baltic Sea before. So you know what they are trying to say. How many of you have taken a swim in a really salt water so you actually can't dive, you can't go under it? If you haven't tried that one before, you know that regardless of how many times you read about it, there will be a different experience. So that's why we try to model the KaosPilot in the sense that you really go through some experiential type of learning in order to really embody what does it mean to be the change that I want to see. Experiences. Yes, this one we prepared a bit. The big one. The big one that stands out for you from the school as an example. I just changed.
Taigi vienas iš dalykų, ką mes darome, mes pradžioj būdame Danijoje. Danijoje mokomės, mes kaip turime 4 disciplinas: verslas, projektai, lyderystė ir procesų dizainas. Tai yra maždaug kaip organizacijų konsultavimas, kaip jiems dirbti kartu. Ir kai visą tai mes jau išmokstame, jau taip besimokydami, kiek mes gaunam patirties per realius klientus, per viską, ir jau atrodo jau lyg ir suvokiau. Tada turime semestrą, 2 metų antras semestras, kuris angliškai vadinasi outpost. Ir mūsų visus, išsiuntimas, išvykimas, ir mūsų visus 35 žmonės išsiunčia kažkur į visiškai skirtingą vietą pasaulyje, ko mes nesitikėjome. Mes išvažiavome į Kolumbiją, 35 žmonės, Kolumbija, Bogota. 8 milijonai, labai skiriasi nuo Orguso, kur 200 000, nesupranti, kas vyksta, eismas, kamščiai, vagystės, pagrobimai, užplėšimai, ispaniškai kalba gal 2 iš 35, kolumbiečiai nekalba angliškai. Prie viso to reikia pačiam susirasti, kur gyventi, reikia dirbti ne su vienu projektu, o su 3, kokiais įtraukti vietinius žmonės į projektą ir vietiniai klientai. Ir spėkit, kaip tada iš tiesų vyksta gyvenimas. Tai tokia patirtis, kad mes dirbam, veikiam, bet iš tiesų tai yra tikras gyvenimas. Jau įpratai atrodo viskas gerai ir atrodo jau žinau, kaip turi būti. Bet va ta tikra Kolumbija, kas tenai yra, kaip jie gyvena, ką daryti, kaip su jais dirbti. Aš po Kolumbijos dar negaliu atsistatyti, aš nuolat vėluoju, nes kažkaip Pietų Amerika. Ir čia mes dirbam su daug vietinių kolumbiečių, su kuriais darėme daug skirtingų projektų. Bet mano geriausia patirtis yra, kai aš pasiekiau tokį lygį, kad nuėjau susitikti su savo svajonių žmogum. Ar žinote, kas jisai toks? Mockus, Antanas Mockus. Aš esu daug apie jį girdėjęs, daug skaitęs apie projektus, ką jisai darė, apie jo iniciatyvas, apie jo žaismingus būdus spręsti problemas, apie jo drąsą. Ir mes bandėme su juo susisiekti. Ir mokyklai nepavyko, jisai buvo per daug užsiėmęs, tada aš jam parašiau lietuviškai laišką, kad labai norėčiau susitikti ir pakviesti ir taip toliau. Ir Mockus atrašė per sekretorę, sako, suorganizuok su juo susitikimą. Ir aš važiavau susitikti su Mockum. Važiuoju su dviračiu, atėjau pas jį į ofisą susitikti ir galvoju, laukiu susitikimo su Mockum. Man Obama nėra taip aukštai kaip Mockus, bet susitikus su Mockum, pakalbėjęs, pasidalinus savo projektais, pasidalinus tai, ką mes veikėm, išgirdus jį, mes organizavom paskaitą. Bet vėlgi, kad tai nebūtų vien tik patirtis man, aš pagalvojau, gerai, mes turėsime paskaitą, mes nustepsime, apsidžiaugsime visą kitą, bet mes išvažiuojam. Aš sugebėjau pakviesti 20 kolumbiečių į paskaitą. Ir kad tai būtų patirtis jiem, nes kolumbiečiai iki jo nedasikas. Aš iki jo dasikasiau, nes buvau lietuvis. Ir po paskaitos buvo toks labai fainas momentas, kada žiūriu, įvyko paskaita ir kolumbiečiai nuėjo kalbėti su Mockum ir aš taip šonę kamputį žiūriu, jie kalbasi. Verslo kortelėm apsikeitė, aš taip tyliai, yes, galiu važiuoti namo. Ir sakau, va, po tokių dalykų galvoju, bet taigi čia mokykla, ar čia gyvenimas, ar čia kaip, ar čia... Iš tokių dalykų, iš tokių stiprių dalykų iš tiesų susikonstruoja tokie dalykai. Aš dabar nebijau, atrodo, su ko nori eiti, kalbėti, daryti, bendrauti. Tai va čia viena iš patirčių, kuri man įstrigo iš Kolumbijos.
So I will add on that one, the 2 points. We met Mockus the year before Aurimas came. The second year, he wasn't very interested in meeting us. So it was some of my colleagues that wanted to have him back, but he didn't have time or didn't want to, we don't know. Then he called. Then he came. It also gives you an impression of actually who is creating the change. Who is it actually that make things happen? Right? It's not always the teachers, it's not always the principals, it's not always the administration. Sometimes the solution can come from different perspectives or from different angles of approach. So this is also a very sad day when you talk about Obama and Mockus, but for me, maybe in my generation, maybe Mandela stands out. And it was an interesting aspect when we were in South Africa last year, when he was sick. The interesting was, how did people talk about him? And I heard it's just as recent as 3 weeks ago in France, when the foreign minister or something from South Africa talked about Mandela. He started to say something like this. So what Mandela has taught us, and it stayed with me because we would probably never talk about the Danish prime minister like that, or the Swedish for that matter. So what the Swedish prime minister have taught us as a people, it's a very different way. We would probably say something, so what the Swedish prime minister said, did, thought, stuff like that, they don't teach us. But apparently in South Africa, Mandela teaches his people. And it's an interesting how we view what leadership actually is. That leads us in to another conversation we would like to share with you. Is what is the role of the teacher? What do we want? What do we want to see? Yeah, you can, yes, you decide.
I decide.
You know the culture.
Kadangi lietuvių kultūra yra pavargus ir sėsli, aš vis tiek jums duosiu iššūkį, pasikeiskite vėl vietomis. Žinokit, penktadienio pabaiga, bet iššūkiai ir aptarkite visą tai, apie ką mes kalbam dabar. Noriu pasidalinti savo įžvalgom. Ar niekas nenorit pasidalinti kažką? Tie kalbėt, nenorit sustoti, norit pasidalinti.
Na, mes čia kartu ir moksleivė turėjom ratelį ir kaip mokytojai, tai bendrai nusprendėm, kad mokytoja šiandien dienai turėtų būti, na, sakykime, jeigu procentaliai, kokiu 20% teoretikas, tai reiškia teorijos pateikti minimaliai, kaip konsultantas konsultuoti tai, ką moksleivis rado ir nukreipti tiesioginę prasme ir, na, sakykime, toks kaip koordinatorius jo tolesnės veiklos.
So in these times it should be 20% theory and the 80% should be coaching, consulting, helping to find out and coordinate, but more action. Kas dar norėtų pasidalinti? Kokiam? Nu, kas nors, nejaugi vienas žmogus viską aptarė. Ką moksleiviai mano?
Studentai nusprendė, kad šiuolaikinis mokytojas turėtų žiūrėti atviriau į vaiko kūrybiškumą, būti tolerantiškesnis jam ir pasakyti, kad taip, mėlynas obuolys iš tikrųjų egzistuoja. Kad mokėtų pasakyti, kad jo neįstatytų kažkokius rėmus.
Mes dar šnekėjom, kad mokytojas turėtų būti ir pats labai besimokantis stipriai. Ir kad jisai pats visada kvestionuotų save, ar iš tikrųjų tai, ką aš darau, duoda tokį rezultatą, kokį turi duoti, kad vaikas iš tikrųjų mokosi.
Ir dar mokytojas turėtų būti ne tik tas, kuris moko, bet tas, kuris nurodo kelią, kaip mokytis.
Ačiū labai. The teacher should be also not the one who teaches, but also who helps to find the way to learn, or how do you learn? The way to find your ways of learning. Yes. So those were the insights. And one more.
Mes manom, kad mokytojas turėtų leisti mokiniam tarti savo žodį tame mokyme, ar ne, tai yra mokiniai dar turėtų pasakyti, ko jie nori išmokti. Ir tam tikri dalykai kiltų iš mokinio, ar ne? Nu, čia aš ne apie mokytoją jau kalbu, bet tiesiog apie mokymą, ar ne, patį.
The kids should feel more ownership and they could ask the teacher what they want and be part of kind of designing some of the education.
All right.
Okay, I'm giving back to Krister.
So it's interesting when we talk about teachers and the role of teachers and staff, because we come from a very different tradition. Teachers, as such, is not what we refer to. On one hand, you can say that everyone at the school is a teacher. On the other hand, you can say we have no teachers at all. We have a very fairly small staff, but the people that work with the students, we refer to them as team leaders. We used to call them coaches. Then everyone became a coach in Denmark, so we dropped that. And we focused more on the team leader aspect. But that doesn't mean that people don't teach. But normally, so every year, for a class like Aurimas class, we have approximately 60 people coming from the outside every year to deliver either a few hours or a longer type of training session. Some of them are more classical teachers. Most of them are some sort of trainers. For instance, how to get feedback, how to solve conflicts, how to make decisions. So it's very, very practically oriented, even if it's rooted in a lot of research and theory. The team leader role is at least, we get a lot of questions about what does that mean and how is that done. Because it's not without shadows. Not everything functions perfectly. But it functions really well with the type of students we have. Because our students are supposed to grow into leadership positions. They are supposed to grow into some sort of entrepreneurial activity. And as such, they need to be able to take initiative, take responsibility, and also to manage ambiguity and uncertainty. So the team leader's role is practically to interpret this curriculum and design the learning journey for the students throughout the 3 years. To decide ultimately which projects are we going to work on, who is going to come in and work with the students, and to facilitate that learning space that opens up. So when we do practical projects, it's not just to throw the students out into projects and then they learn. No, learning often comes after. It comes when you have some sort of debrief, when you have some sort of structured reflection taking place. And we use theory to prepare, but also to deepen and heighten the learning that happens through the practice. So the role of the team leader, to some extent, is more narrower than a classical teacher, but it can certainly also be viewed as far more broad. It is a role that maybe you can exemplify with the person you used to have in kindergarten. That adult person that in a way said, we are starting now, to someone that said, you need to put your hat on because it's going to be really cold when we go outside. Say, now it's time to eat. That person that in a way manages everything throughout the educational journey that you are enrolled at, but also the person that certainly leads. And they lead a lot by example. At the school, as the Aurimas example with who actually brought Mokus into the school, when you look at the who is responsible for making it a success or a fiasco for that matter, the school in a way views every single participant at this school has some sort of leadership responsibility. In every individual that is hired at this school, it is written into their employment contract that you have a leadership responsibility. You are supposed to lead by example. And every year when we do some sort of talk with our staff, that is brought up. In what way have you actually helped? In what way have you led in a constructive way for your students? So you can't just say that my job was to do this or that, which is like nailing down, I was supposed to teach this. No, we also ask, in what way did you help to bring about the culture that helped the students to move to a new level? It also goes for the students. They are, as we talked about earlier, they are selected based on that they have something that other people could benefit from. It also means that when they work in projects, we very often come into situations where the school do not have the answers. We don't know what is right and what is wrong. So in a way we encourage them, the students, to figure out how to take lead, how to take initiative. And also sometimes when we face larger challenges, the students are encouraged to step up. That means that we become some sort of collaborative movement where leadership is something that does not necessarily come out of a position. It is something that comes out of a recognition from the others that you have something to offer for us now. That can mean the student, that could be the principal. I can see on time that we are not going to talk about this one. So we are going to jump into this one. So this is going to be our last slide. Very often we also get questions about, so how do you do? What happens with the students when they leave? And these are some statistics that shows that we are very fortunate. We have been very successful, and we are very fortunate for what happens with our students when they leave. We have just conducted an alumni research. It's not even public yet. But it shows the same trend as the one we did 3 years ago. 97% of all alumni from the KaosPilots are in a full-time position. They have some sort of occupation. And which is astonishing considering the times that we are part of. And considering that when you leave the KaosPilot, you get a KaosPilot diploma. You don't get an accredited degree. And how come? Well, it gives a couple of answers when you look a bit further down. One of our measurements is that we want people to take some sort of leadership positions. More than 50% of everyone that has graduated from the KaosPilot have authority over minimum one other person. How come? Well, they're good at it. That's why. They are becoming promoted into leadership positions. The last one is a really important figure in Denmark today. That is the amount of people that consider themselves or get their primary income from their own company that they've started. 38% of our students are entrepreneurs, full-time. We have more than 20 that are part-time entrepreneurs in addition. So in that sense, we are really achieving the things that we hope. Partly that has to do that we make the right selection of students, but that's not the whole truth, because more than often the students did not know when they entered into the school what they would be doing 3 years later. So the schools offer them something in terms of this. And partly maybe one can see this in terms of that leadership taking place, leading back to our original question. That, do you differ between leadership and management here when you talk? Yeah? Do you know how old the concept of management is? It is not very old actually. It's approximately 100 years. Do you know where it comes from? See, this is what we train our students, to be curious. Don't take it for granted. You need to check. When someone tells you something, you need to check. And if you want to be a good entrepreneur, it's not enough to go into a room like this and sit on the chairs. A good entrepreneur will look under the chair and see who has delivered this chair. Maybe I can do it better, cheaper, faster. This is what we try to train with our students. In terms of management, it comes very much from the business schools, which maybe is 130 years old. And it was introduced as an idea of how can you meet the growing demands when companies are growing. In the 19th century, very few companies had more than 1,000 employees. Basically, were family small run businesses. But when they started to grow as a consequence of industrialism, there was a need to someone that's going to manage all the uneducated farmer boys that moved into the city and started to work at these companies. And as such, the concept of management happens. And it has proved to be enormously beneficial for the last 100 years. However, the concept of leadership is far older. It's far, far older. I'm not sure how you say it in Lithuanian, but we have a lot of words for it in Scandinavian. The challenge is that from a leadership perspective, or at least our understanding, is that a leadership is not a position. It's more an act. And it's an act that comes from someone acknowledging you having the power to lead. It is not so that I become a leader just because that I hold the microphone and I take the floor. In this sense, one could view me as a leader because that you accept me. If all of you will stand up and leave, I would not be very much of a leader. And the same maybe goes in our perspective also for the teachers. As long as the students accept that the teacher is a good teacher, they become a good teacher. So when the students come to me and they say, my teachers suck, my teacher is horrible, my teacher don't deliver, we challenge them and say, I can't help you making the teacher a good teacher. It's not in my power to put the finger on the teacher or the team leader and say, now he or she will be great. It's not in my power as a principal. I'm not God. I can't do that. But I tell the students that it's within your power to make that person as good as possible. So we try to change the conversation so the student take on the assignment of making the lecturer or the teacher or the team leader to become as good as possible. So we should also remember that it's not only a responsibility of the school or the principal or the ministry. It is actually, if you want to have a great school, you need to make your principal really, really good. If you want to be a good teacher, you need to allow the students making you really, really good. So that's it. Do you want to say something? Maybe if there's any questions or
Concrete examples of
yeah.
how I felt the leadership of when I came to school. No, I have it on. Tiesiog norėjau pasidalinti keletą pavyzdžių, iki kokio lygio yra pasitikėjimas ir lyderystė. Prieš įstojant į mokyklą klausimą, ką tu nori daryti, kaip tau galim padėti, kaip tave įgalinti, ką tu darytum, kaip tu bendrautum, ką tu duotum komandai. Tu jau jauti potencialą. Atėjus į mokyklą, tu iš kitų žiūri potencialą. Ką jie turi, kaip kartu galime bendradarbiauti. Pirmą dieną atėjus į mokyklą, kiekvienam žmogui duodamas raktas. Tai yra mūsų mokykla, tavo mokykla, mūsų kartu. eik, daryk, ką nori, yra minimalios taisyklės, tai yra mūsų erdvė, kurią mes dalinamės. Tai būna kažkiek jovalo ar ko, bet tai tas, nežinau, angliškai ownership, kad mano mokykla, mano įgalimas, tu nori grįžti, nori būti, nori dalintis, tai jautiesi, kad tai yra dalelė tavęs. Mokytojai bendravimas yra visiškai lygiam lygmenį, kas buvo, tarkim, nežinau, ir mokytojai labai sugeba tą lyderio poziciją neišdėstyti, nesakyti, kad tu daryk tą ir tą ir tą, o gražiai lėtai atsitraukti, nors aš žinau, kad jie žino tą informaciją ir sakytų, kaip tu manai, ką tu darytum, o kaip tu ieškotum, o kas veiktų, o koks kitas žingsnis, o kada eisi, nu tai gerai, eik maždaug daryk. Bet iš visų tų pusių, kiek yra daug pasitikėjimo, kiek yra daug skatinimo, kiek yra daug nekišimo, neprievartavimos informacija, kiek yra viso to, kaip gražiai sudėliota, kad iš tiesų nežinau, kas iki galo vyko per tuos 3 metus, bet tai buvo geriausi metai mano gyvenime, kad tai buvo geriausia patirtis, daugiausiai išmokau, aš manau, per savaitę aš ten išmokau daugiau negu per 3 universitetus Lietuvoje, kurias mečiau, aš susitikau labai daug draugų, visko, aš turiu darbą, čia yra besijokiančių žmonių aplinkui, nes tai yra darbdaviai ir mokėtojai. Mes iš dalies esam konsultantai, dirbam tarptų ir mes esame netgi tarp 38, nes mes dirbam 5 kartu. Tai va, visa tai buvo, nežinau, pasaka ir pasaka toliau tęsiasi ir po mokyklos išėjus yra tas, kad mes susikūrėme savo darbą, savo svajonę, dėl to mes ir esame tarp tų 97, o ne ieškome, kur mus kaip įkišti taisyti. Tai va, tokia asmeninė kaip studento patirtis iš tos mokyklos. That's it. Was it good? Don't know, ask them.
Thank you.
I might motivate them to go to your school, but I have to know something.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll just translate to the group. Ar studentai turi mokėti, kiek mokėti, nes gal kas nors nori motyvuoti savo studentus eiti į mokyklą? I know. Kadangi aš ten buvau, tai tada man reikia atsakyti. Mokėti reikia ir atrodo, kad tai yra daug. Tai yra už 3 metus išeina 60 000 litų. Tai 20 000 litų metams, bet žiūrint, kokios kainos gali būti ISM, tai KaosPilot bus pigiau. Iš kitos pusės tai yra aukščiausios kokybės dėstytojai nuo 9 iki 4 kasdieną, kurie atskrenda iš viso pasaulio, kurie dalinasi nežinia kokią informaciją. Ir kai kurių dėstytojų kainos yra, kai jie važiuoja dirbti su verslo klientais, yra 30 000 eurų diena. Ir galima su tuo sužaisti, galima žiūrėti, jeigu anksčiau atvykstate į Daniją ir užsiregistruojat kaip darbininkas, galima įstoti ir tada gauti galbūt stipendiją. Ir yra būdų, kaip tai apeiti ir visa kita, bet iš tiesų nepasakosiu, aš kaip jums čia ką. Bet investicija verta, investicija geriausiai į save ir jeigu jau būt kūrybingiams prieš įstojant, galima iš tiesų išgyventi.
I have a sense you should not translate that part for me.
And delete it from the film. Kas dar klausimų? Questions? Answers? Thank you.
If you have anything, you can always find us online, KaosPilot.dk. And if you're ever in Denmark, you can come by.
And if you see me on the street, grab me and talk to me.
Thank you for being here so late on a Friday night.